The last voyage of the Demeter has just hit theaters. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Well, sometimes that is better.
So The Last Voyage of the Demeter is a new take on the Dracula story, just focusing on a singular chapter from the original Bram Stoker novel, which I think is a great concept for a movie. That was one of the biggest reasons I was so intrigued by this film. It's just the story of the Voyage of the Demeter, which, you know, is like in the title. Transporting Dracula would have been a pretty good title, at least for a metal band, maybe a deathcore band, that would be pretty cool. The breakout Norwegian director Andre Overdahl, who does movies like Troll Hunter and Autopsy of Jane Doe, is that what it is? The Autopsy of Jane Doe. That is a killer movie. He directs this one, and it definitely feels a little more closer to scary stories to tell in the dark than it does with those previous films. The film has an amazing cast too, including Javier Botet, Corey Hawkins, Liam Cunningham, David Dastmalchian. Do I have to go on? So many good people in this one. But basically, the film is about this crew on the Demeter is kind of hunted by Dracula as, you know, the guy gets a little hungry. My man is looking for a snack that doesn't smile back. He already went through the cattle at the end of the first act anyway. Oh, is that a spoiler? Well, anyways, let's not talk about spoilers for a second. Spoiler-free review, let's get into it. The Demeter, as I'm gonna call it in my little shorthand way of doing things, is fine. I don't know. I wasn't super impressed by this one. I loved the concept and I loved the trailer. I was pretty impressed by those two things, but this movie just didn't live up to that. Instead of being this like psychological horror, this feels more like a PG-13 horror film, which is unbelievably disappointing. I was going into this with the mindset that it was going to be like The Witch from 2016, not so much like Ouija, but I got tangled up in a whole bunch of Ouija. The way that they set up their characters is just really messy. Like, they give you like little portions of the character at the beginning, and then they'll throw like the most important thing you needed to know the whole time in the third act when it doesn't matter anymore. That was really frustrating, especially with the main character, who I wanted to know more about the entire film. That's like almost all I could think about. I'm like, I want to like this guy, but I know nothing about him. The trailer shows off a lot of good practical effect moments in the movie, but the majority of the creature stuff is all digital. I think Javier Botet probably did a good job, but I couldn't tell from this movie, which is a shame. It's kind of the same criticism I have about his character, the Crooked Man in the Conjuring universe. I bet he's awesome, but the majority of the time that character is on screen, it's digital. Like, you're really gonna hire Bill Skarsgård to play Pennywise, and then 50% of that movie, we get a digital Pennywise walking around? Come on. Javier is fantastic in the Wreck movies, though, if you've never seen those. 10 out of 10s. There's a lot of talking in circles, too. Like, a lot of this movie feels like fluff. They kind of like come to the same conclusion multiple times, and then they don't do anything about it the first time, but then the next time they're like, oh, wait, we gotta do something about this. Continuing with that subject, our characters are just really dumb in this movie. Something happens at the beginning of the second act, and then it happens again later on in the second act, and they don't do anything different. Like, they know something's going to happen, but they don't change the way they think about said thing. This is really hard to talk about without talking spoilers. It's a frustrating movie to me because I saw so much potential in this. This is one of the only movies where my comment section was not divided on it. Like, people were actually really excited about this one, and I'm just utterly disappointed. Stepping out of my bias for a second, if you're someone who likes older movies, you may really like this film. The thing that I'm not crazy about with this movie is that it feels very reminiscent of like old school horror. I'm talking like classics, like classic Universal monster, I almost said Hammer Bros. I've been playing too much Mario. It feels very much so like Hammer Pictures, like classic Universal monsters, in that sense that like they set up characters in the same way. But in my opinion, I feel like as time has gone on, we've just gotten better at things like character development or, you know, making creatures really scary. Even though there is a certain kind of nostalgia to watching movies that are made like this. Like Creature from the Black Lagoon, there's a reason that I got the poster right here. I love that movie so much, but it has flaws. And one of the biggest things about it is that almost all of the male characters in that movie are exactly the same. So much so to the point that they even look alike. It's really tough to differentiate the certain characters in that movie, and I just feel like we've gotten better with not only diverse casting, but just like trying to cast people who stand out as their own unique character. Creature from the Black Lagoon and many older movies suffer from that. The characters are set up in a similar way to older movies, which once again, may be something you really liked about this movie because films nowadays don't really do that, but for me, it was just a little jarring. I just wasn't crazy about this one, and it felt like a lot of wasted potential. But now let's get into some spoilers. If you have not seen the film, so help me God, if you keep watching this, I'm gonna take a shit on your windshield, and I mean it. Getting into spoilers. Once again, just kind of harping on the things I said in my spoiler-free review, this feels very much so like a missed opportunity. A great concept, but just not well executed. The idea of taking just a single chapter out of the book of the original Dracula and just expanding that into a whole story, we're just gonna do the captain's log. That's awesome. The vibe of this movie is very consistent. That's another positive I'll give it. It feels like a sea voyage gone wrong the whole time. I just don't care for any of these characters. Corey Hawkins' Clemens character, for instance, I think is a great character, but the way that they relay all the information to you is just super messy. At the very beginning of the movie, we see Clemens trying to get this job on the Demeter so badly. It's never explained why, but he is a doctor and he just wants work. He's looking for money. In the third act, Clemens finally gives us some backstory on the character so we can maybe root for him when he says that he pushed his way through college and that he wasn't offered a job afterwards just because of the color of his skin. That's super intriguing, and I'm like, oh shit, I want to root for this guy now. He's had some crazy misfortune in his life for something that's completely unreasonable. Now I want him to win big time, but I never felt that way about the character in the first two acts when I really needed to feel that way about him. And there's ample opportunity for them to have spelled this backstory for the character, but they never do. Like, there's this sequence very early on in the first act when they finally get to the boat, and they ask Clemens, like, why are you here? Like, why are you on this ship? You're this big doctor with a degree and all that. And he kind of just gives a nothing answer. Like, the scene is almost pointless because he's like, well, you know, I just want to figure out the way the world works. And it's like, what the does that mean? Clemens is so closed off as a character until we get into the third act, and I just think that's such a shame. I would have been rooting for him this whole time otherwise. I'm all about keeping certain things about a character mysterious until later on in the film, but this was something crucial from the get-go that we needed to know as the audience so we could root for this main character. It can't just be because it's a familiar actor we all know and love. That maybe works in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but also not really. That's also kind of part of the reason we're laughing at movies like Commando. So I didn't even really take this character seriously until the third act when we finally got some compelling backstory, but then the whole plot just fizzles out. They had their cake and they ate it too by trying to kill Dracula, have our characters escape, but then Dracula escapes. I see so many good movies that can't decide on an ending. They just don't want to have a bad or a good ending. They have to have something in between, and I'm like, why? Instead, the third act of this movie is just super rushed and super weird. We'll get into that in a second. Let's talk more about these crappy characters. David Dastmalchian plays the first mate on this ship, and he's obviously very passionate about his job. He feels like he lives on the Demeter, is something that's been established this whole time. But then his character pretty much serves like no purpose to the plot. Like, you get this like really heroic sting music as he picks up this axe to sink the ship, and he feels really bad about it, but he's gonna be a hero. The problem with that is he hasn't done anything heroic up until this point. In fact, he's kind of been a jerk the entire movie. You can't just have a scumbag turn into a hero because he got some Bear McCreary music playing over it. Even though that music is banging, that's a huge positive from this movie. A score from that man, mwah, chef's kiss. I just don't find David Dastmalchian's character all that useful to the plot. It's very inefficient. They could have just had the captain do this, and this would have been a way more compelling plotline for him because he loses his son during the events of the film. That would have been kind of cool if he's the one to take the axe to the hull. He's the captain after all. I mean, come on. And speaking of that, the captain gets a really lame death after having probably the best story out of any of these characters without a doubt. In one of the only shocking moments this film has to offer, which I know is really mean, but my God, was this predictable, the kid gets bitten by Dracula, and I thought that was actually pretty good. But where it ends up going just has me scratching my head and saying, why would these characters do this in this situation? After getting bitten, the kid dies and starts transforming into a vampire. They learned earlier that, hey, if you get bitten, you're gonna burst into flames when the sun comes out. But when they go to throw the kid off of the boat, the captain's like, wait, he moved. I'm telling you, he moved. The kid is alive. He's a vampire, right? We're all expecting that to happen. Why didn't they just show us the kid's leg move or something underneath the sheet? That was so frustrating. They didn't show us anything. This whole sequence just felt like it came out of nowhere because they wanted one more scary thing to happen. You never see the kid move. The captain goes over there, takes the sheet off of him, he bursts into flames. Like, what a dumb decision. These characters make multiple really dumb decisions that just had me not wanting to root for them. Trying to say something nice about this film though, early on, the effects and the kills look pretty damn good. The first two ones we really get are actually pretty solid. We get Javier Botet in practical effects. Sometimes. Although at the first part, when they're kind of on the ship and like there's some good kills, there's some really creepy atmosphere too. They don't know what is going on yet. It just turns into this like nothing, blah, kind of digital monster movie that feels like something you would end up finding on Tubi. You get this scene with another nothing character and he kind of goes out on a lifeboat and then he gets attacked by digital Dracula and it just doesn't look good at all. It looks like Thor Love and Thunder again. And the kill's mostly done off screen, so it's not really fun to watch because I'm not really watching anything. Sound design is super important, but it can only take you so far sometimes. My two favorite parts of this movie though was like the very early on stuff where it's very mysterious. It kind of feels like The Thing where no one has any idea what's going on. That's a whole lot of fun. I also really liked the very ending of this and kind of like the denouement, so to say. You have Clemens at this pub and he thinks he sees Dracula down the way on the other side of the bar and he sneaks past him, gets out of the bar, and Dracula is gone. But Clemens is still chasing after him. Okay, pretty solid movie, not a bad ending there. I wanted to see Corey and Dracula have a full-on fight, man, and just whatever. It's just like, Dracula gets pinned against the hull and they escape, or whatever. I don't know. Anna had potential to be a compelling character, but I just wasn't very invested. I don't know, there was just a lot of missed opportunities with this movie. I really wanted to like it, and I just found myself nearly falling asleep throughout the middle of this one. I recommend a Coke or a Pepsi if you're gonna see this movie, that's all I'm saying. Get a little caffeine in you. I give The Last Voyage of the Demeter a 2 out of 10. It was fine, I have no interest in watching it again, it was kind of boring. Went at a snail's pace, as they say. If you disagreed with me though, that's great, I want you to disagree. If you loved this movie, it was a 10 out of 10 in your opinion, pitch it to me as to why in the comments. I want to hear it. That's the best part of channels like this, baby. We all have different opinions on things. I want to hear them all. Leave it for me in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching my brand new review video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon as well if you want to co-host my podcast. The link for that is in the description of this video. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.